So, hello everyone. Today's session is Intro to Zoho Books and Migrating Accounting Systems, and we have a special guest, Josh, who works at Preston and Nagley over in New York. We'll introduce him here in a little bit. But before we do that, let's go ahead and go over some housekeeping items. So today's webinar is hosted by the zoho.com/CPA. That's the partner channel over here at Zoho for accountants and bookkeepers. Everybody's welcome. So it's not specific to CPAs. We also have bookkeepers and financial experts in there as well. And today's session is presented in Showtime. And let's kind of go over that a little bit because that's what you're seeing here if you're on mobile or if you're using your computer. If you look at your left-hand side of your computer screen, you'll see a questions panel and a chat section and a handouts area. The chats is kind of where you let us know, hey, I can't hear you guys, or the slide's not changing. And the questions area is where you ask specific questions to Zoho, whether it's Zoho Books or some of our other applications or migration. And we'll be able to answer some of those live throughout the session. And also we have support here as well that can answer more specific Zoho Books questions. This session does qualify for 1.5 CPE credits for all those accountants out there. And in order to earn that CPE credit, you must attend for at least 90 minutes, complete 4 out of the 6 polling questions. And here's an example of one. And food is always on our mind, so I thought I would just keep it going. So best-selling candy bar in the US. I'll leave this up for about 10 seconds or so. So you'll see it kind of pop up on your screen, and then you're able to vote, and I can show the results like so. And I will let you know, it's not the Hershey's chocolate bar. It's actually the Snickers bar. So, well, this was back in 2015, so it may not be super accurate, but you see it just pops up on your screen. You're able to see what everybody answered. We don't really ask. It's more questions just in general. It's not specific. You're not right or wrong with it, whatever you answer. And at the end of the session, we ask that you complete the evaluation that pops up if you want to receive that CPE credit. And if you don't want to receive if you're not here for CPE, we also ask that you complete the evaluation because it helps us improve the presentations going forward. Yeah, so that's it for housekeeping. So to introduce the accountant team over here at Zoho Books, you have myself, Nathan Rogerson. I'm the marketing manager. Probably need to move myself on the far left here because I always introduce myself first. But I've been with Zoho for almost 2 years now, and my background is 5 years as an accounting advisor. So I'm very fluent in accounting, and I obviously love accounting if I'm keeping it as my career path. But we also have Val Steed, which is our resident CPA. Val, you there?
Yes. Sorry, folks. I usually get my mic off before I try to clear my throat, but didn't expect that. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. I've got a background in accounting technology going back many years and also public practice as a CPA. So when I got the opportunity to join Zoho and help work on an accountant's channel, accountant's team, and help revise and update our finance suite and add features that are important to accountants, bookkeepers, and enrolled agents and everybody that's practicing in this kind of area jumped on it. So glad to be here, thrilled to be here. You'll see we'll talk a lot today about our program and a lot about our solutions, and it's really, really exciting. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. We also have Dheeraj, our lead accountant program manager over there, and he also will be in the questions area, answering specific questions on Zoho Books. So I'd love to lean on him as well for our presentations. Dheeraj, are you there?
Yes, Nathan. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in for today's session. So I've been with Zoho for more than 5 years now and always working on the finance suite of products. So currently, I take care of the partner network for the finance suite. And please feel free to shoot your questions on the questions tab. I'll be happy to answer those for you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dheeraj. And we also have Tala Bakar. He'll be going over Zoho Books in today's presentation. Tala, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Tala. I'm the program manager for Zoho's Finance Partner Program. I've been at Zoho for a little over 6 years now, which is a pretty exciting milestone. It's been a fantastic journey, and for those that have seen the evolution of the Zoho Finance products, I think you've noticed we've also come a long way. So what we're going to do today and what I'll focus on initially is just guiding you through a little demo of Zoho Books, kind of getting you familiar with the different aspects of the product before I pass it off to my good colleague and friend, Josh Blesnick, who's going to take you through a migration process and how to migrate into Zoho Books.
Yeah, thanks for that. And speaking of Josh, we'll go ahead and have him introduce himself. But before he does that, I want to say he's been a very valuable partner for Zoho, and he's probably touched around 100 or more Zoho clients. And I think you'll be able to see his expertise in migration throughout this presentation. That's really what he does over there at Preston and Nagley, and he also does more with them. But I'll let Josh kind of introduce himself and tell us a little bit more about Preston and Nagley.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today, and thank you, Zoho team, for the opportunity. My name is Josh Blesnick. I joined the Preston and Nagley team. We're a full-fledged accounting firm located here in New York City. I joined the team in 2019, and we're a full-service accounting firm specializing in tax and audit. And we also have a technology division where we specialize in implementations, migrations, conversions, as well as training and support. So I do the Zoho umbrella within the firm, and I mainly do migrations from other systems to Zoho. And I'm really looking forward to giving you a demo and showing you the best way to migrate your data and start using Zoho Books as soon as possible.
Yeah, thanks for that, Josh. Appreciate it. And so we'll go ahead and start. And today's agenda is who is Zoho, and Val Steve will kind of cover that here in a little bit. And then we'll talk about cloud accounting with Zoho Books. And like Josh mentioned, he'll be covering the complete guide to migrating accounting systems. So Val, I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Yeah, and before I dive into that, let me just say, folks, we certainly appreciate Preston Nagley. Honestly, they have been very good to us. They have hosted us for a live finance seminars in their office. Their partners have donated time on webcasts, come in and joined us for webcasts back on the PPP program and also on tax planning. And we've got one coming up in November on early tax strategies with one of their partners. And Josh has been willing many times to join us on these webinars for migration and also just general Zoho books and stuff. So just realize it. We really are lucky to have them come in here and speak with us for a few minutes. So once again, thanks, Preston Nagley and Josh. And let's talk a little bit about Zoho. So what on earth is a Zoho? We get that question a lot. And actually that is our domain, Zoho.com. And underneath Zoho, that cloud domain there, we started 25 years ago building applications in the cloud. Really started with CRM. Where we're at today is a little overwhelming, so I'm going to keep this focused. We have 55 plus applications that you could get licensed in different ways. There's different bundles. We have bundles by category. We have bundles overall. There's one called Zoho One that's really cost effective, where you get 55 plus apps for not much money per month. There's many different ways, but you can also individually license apps one at a time. Today, we're really kind of focusing in on the finance suite. So if you see the whole big picture there of all the different apps, you'll notice that there is 6 suites. And today, we're going to kind of focus in on the finance suite area, particularly on Zoho Books. The real advantage, by the way, don't want to like tout our horn too much, but one of the clear advantages we have at Zoho, because this is an integrated SaaS-based, cloud-based suite of applications, they're already integrated. And many times in the accounting technology world, that becomes the problem. You go out and buy product A, but you want product C to tie in. I mean, just an example would be something like, I really want to go with Peachtree because I know Peachtree. That's great, but I really need to hook in an expense management tool like Expensify. Well, then you got to build the integrations, everything. With Zoho, we have books, we have billing, we have subscription billing, and then we have an expense module that competes with Concur, Expensify, all these other people. We even have a mail campaign tool. I was answering some questions this week about a mail campaign tool that hooks back in our CRM, and that hooks back into our books, and that hooks back in. You get the idea, folks. It's all integrated, and that's our key benefit.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
This is the team. We're the team that set up this Zoho Finance Partner Program. We're trying to grow this. And we even have our own website. It's zoho.com/CPA. And we had to pick one set of lettering. And being a CPA myself, I just picked that. Please don't let that bother you. If you're a bookkeeper, an accountant, even just a small business owner, but you want to be involved in this program, or you want to find us or reach out and find more information, this is the website to go. And the reason we did this, and I lobbied heavily for this, if you just go to zoho.com, you'll notice that there's a lot out there and you're going to kind of get lost. Okay. So we wanted to keep it focused on, if you're, accountant or bookkeeper doing this, if you're doing this, here's some apps to consider. That's what we're mainly doing off this Zoho Finance Partner Program site. Also, there are benefits to becoming a partner in Zoho Finance. Okay. You'll get some software for you to use. You'll get more notifications. You get opportunity to sell and resell Zoho products. It's something you ought to consider if you're going to get serious about implementing and helping others with Zoho solutions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. And I did launch the first poll question. So if you're a CPA, please go in there and answer that for your CPE credit. And also, feel free to answer as well if you're just here to see the webinar. So I'll give that about 10 more seconds. And then Tal will start the demo of Zoho Books. Okay, great. Thank you for everybody who answered that poll question. So cloud accounting with Zoho Books. So Tal, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, let me go ahead and transfer control over to you. And you are in control.
Thank you very much. All right, so really quickly, I'm going to open up my screen share. But before I do, I just want to kind of set the stage for how the different Zoho Finance apps fit together. So we're, of course, focusing on Zoho Books today. And Val alluded to this, but we have several finance applications that tie directly into Zoho Books. And you can see the way those integrations sort of work with those arrows there. So all of them are two-way integrations except for Invoice, which is basically which now, just as of recently, is a completely free application for online invoicing, but it's basically only the AR side of your business, doesn't have AP. So once you want to get into billing and true kind of expense and project tracking, you move into Zoho Books. So inside of the Zoho Finance Suite, you can always start with the base product, which I recommend is Zoho Books. And then as you need to expand from there, you can do so. So Zoho Books, for example, has a recurring invoice module. And that may be sufficient initially, but let's say you start making that kind of one of the cornerstones of your business. You may want to move into a product like Zoho Subscriptions, which handles that in a much more robust way, much more similar to how subscription management is done at scale. The same goes for inventory management. Books has basic inventory management. The inventory is tracked using first in, first out. I saw a question related to that. And Zoho Inventory basically expands your inventory management capabilities and ties in marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, has integrations for FBA, has integrations for shopping carts if your website has its own shopping cart. Even Zoho has our own shopping cart called Zoho Commerce. And so you kind of get the idea. So the same goes for expense and checkout. Zoho Payroll is expanding pretty rapidly. As of right now, it's available in about 5 different states with like 4 others in beta version. So the full-fledged states, I believe, are California, Texas, New York, and Florida. It is a very simple payroll application. Definitely recommended for small businesses that don't have really complex payroll, or they're not doing a ton of kind of complicated like deductions. Really standard stuff. Does calculate all the taxes. I use it for a family business that my parents have, and I've been running the payroll on there for a better part of a year. And I've learned a lot about the ins and outs of that product. And it is expanding and getting better. So if you're looking for a really simple solution, Zoho Payroll is there. And I'll just mention right off the bat, because we'll probably get this question later, if you're looking for a 50-state solution, one that Zoho Payroll does not cover yet, we do have an integration with a company called Sure Payroll. And I can link to, maybe somebody can link to that integration in the chat
I'll do that.
panel. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the system. And you should be able to see my screen now, if I can just get confirmation from one of my other trainers.
Yes, we can tell.
All right, perfect.
Clear.
So I'm just going to take you through a quick, demo of the product. And many of you have probably used Zoho Books already, which is why you're here, and maybe many of you are getting familiar, which is why you're here for the migration portion of the webinar. So hopefully you learned something new in this. So this will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll switch over to Josh. So the first thing you're brought into in Zoho Books is the main dashboard. Now, the main idea behind that dashboard is to take you to some reports directly. So for example, my business has clearly been neglected. I haven't been focusing on collecting any payment from my customers, and you'll see I have all these overdue invoices. If I go ahead and click down on my overdue invoices, I'll see that they're split up by a few different date ranges here. And if I want to go to a report for aging details, I'll simply go ahead and click on a specific date range, and then it's going to give me this entire aging details report with all of my customer and invoice information. So this is actually being generated from the reports module here in Zoho Books, which we'll get to in a second. But you'll see that there are a number of things I can do here, like customize this report, change the date range, add some additional aging intervals, and maybe I want to filter by specific columns that I want to show. And if I want to save this report, I can do that as well. Now, reports have the ability to be exported into Excel formats as well as CSV. And you can also export any of the reports to Zoho Sheets. So if you're not familiar with Zoho Sheets, it's basically Zoho's homegrown spreadsheet software. It's fully in the cloud. It's included in your Zoho account. It's totally free. And it's a great resource if you're using a computer that maybe doesn't have Excel or Office 365 installed. So it has almost all of the different functions, formulas, calculations that you want to do inside of this product. So that is a basic idea behind how each of the different functions inside the dashboard take you to a report and what you can do with that report. You'll notice some of the other reports, just for quick example's sake, like cash flow. I can go ahead and click on this specific month. It's going to go ahead and open up a cash flow statement for that month. Obviously, that's kind of in the future. So you'll see the opening balance, the incoming, outgoing, and then ending balances there. You'll also notice some date range toggles here on the top right. So further down, you'll find income and expense. These will take me to a P&L report. And you can see that you can also toggle between cash and accrual basis. So that's really important. And then top expenses just gives you a quick pie chart to give you an idea of where your expenses are going. Now, of course, this is all dependent on you actually entering in this information so that you have something to generate these reports off of. And I'll show you how to do that pretty simply in just a second. The last two things that I'm going to point out on the dashboard are projects and banks and credit cards. So projects are the time tracking projects that are generated here inside of Zoho Books. They're really simple. They're really designed for billing hours to your customers. So if you are a time-based business, this is a really simple way for you to do that. There are some really unique tools that you can tie in for time tracking. Like if you notice in the top right of my Chrome browser, I have this Zoho Books extension, which basically lets me start a timer or log time for a specific project. I can also do this from my Zoho Books app. I can do it from, I think, your Apple Watch. So there's a bunch of different places you can do that. And then once you record that time, based on some different time recording formats, you can then bill your customers. So I'll show you what that looks like. And then lastly, we have bank and credit card integrations here. So in the banking module, you can log into thousands of different banking institutions. So all the major ones are there. Even a lot of small ones are there. So even if you use a credit union, they're going to be listed there. And then all the different kind of credit card accounts. And the main purpose of having your bank account integrated into Zoho Books is so that you can categorize transactions and make sure that the bank ledger is kind of the ultimate, final, record that you're going to be referencing all of the transactions you have in Zoho Books against. So let's take a quick look at that too. Now, before we do that, I just want to move in kind of through the different options here on the left-hand menu. So we're going to use this to kind of navigate really quickly. And then you'll also notice that there are some options at the top right. I'll point out some of those to you as well. And then you'll notice that on most of the pages of the Zoho Finance apps, and specifically Zoho Books, you'll see that we have a live chat here. So the live chat is available 9 to 9 Eastern time. And you can chat with someone from the team. Really great way to get an answer very quickly to a question. You can also try to move that to a phone call if you need, or a screen share. Simply let one of the representatives know. That's the easiest way to reach out to support. Another option for support you'll notice is this question mark icon at the top right. The question mark icon will take you to all the help documents, migration guides, FAQs, and then also some options to send an email if it's something a little bit more complex, or maybe watch a few videos on something you're looking for. So those are just some of the resources that you have there. Now, moving on to the items menu. So items inside Zoho Books is where you're going to store all of your things that you sell. So when we say things that you sell, it could be services, and they can also be goods. So if you are a goods-based business, you're a retail business, this is where you're going to enter in information that's going to have purchase information that you're going to associate with it. So let's say you're selling some kind of widget here, and if I have a SKU number, I can go ahead and add that in. If you do have a barcode scanner, you can actually simply have a USB barcode scanner, click on the field and go ahead and scan that, and that information will get populated here. If you are selling a service that's not going to have purchase information, you can simply enter in what you do have here. These are custom fields that I created for probably a demo at some other point. So you can see if you need to create any of those, you're able to do so from the settings menu. And then finally, at the very bottom, you'll see this option that says Associate Tags. So tags are what we call reporting tags. They are very similar to what QuickBooks calls as classes, if you're familiar with that. These are completely custom tags that I've created, so you can create your own versions of these. And essentially what tags do is that they allow you to create these filters that you can apply to different types of transactions in Zoho Books. Now, when those filters are applied to a transaction, so in this case, we are creating an item or a service, and let's say I had a line of business tag, right? And so I'll put this under design. So let's say I have some design services, and then I might have some other options where I have custom printing, and then I have embroidery. So if I wanted to run a P&L statement on only the design portion of my business, I would actually be able to go to a report, go under line of business and tags, select that, and then filter for only transactions that included this tag. So it's a really great way to run reports in a very specific manner. And you can actually layer up tags as well. So if you have some other options, like over here, you see type of product. This was from a real example from a real customer. They had these 3 different lines of business, medical devices, medicine, and services. And they needed to run reports on specific lines of those products. This is also an option, and you have to be careful with this because it can get really complicated. But if it's a very straightforward kind of application of this, it would be helpful, which is that if you have multiple lines of business, meaning multiple entities that are slightly different that need to be managed in one account. So, the other option is to just create different Zoho Books accounts. And other country or other editions of Zoho Books, not in the US right now, but other editions have the ability to create multiple locations. So we don't have that in Zoho Books just yet for the US. But let's say you needed to create different lines of business. What you could do is you could apply all the transactions and the customers to those different entities, use a single Zoho Books account, and then be able to actually filter all of those transactions from there. So that's one option that you have. And I've talked about tags way too long, so I'll move on from here. There's a few other options that you'll notice under items, like price lists. These are just custom lists of prices, and then if you need to make any inventory adjustments. Now, moving on to the banking section. So this is where you're going to integrate your different bank accounts here. So you'll notice I have a few bank accounts already listed here. To add a new bank, you're going to simply click on Add Bank or Credit Card at the top right. And then go ahead and type in the name of your institution here. So as I mentioned, even like smaller credit unions are here. So a local one that I use is San Mateo. You can go ahead and select them. Basically, it's going to bring in a authentication and you log in. So this is all secure and PCI compliant data. So Zoho doesn't actually store this information. What we do is we pass this through a a secure portal. It logs into your account and then brings in the transactions from your institution. So, for example, if you have two-factor authentication, that's actually a step that's going to load up here on the next screen. So, if you had, let's say, like a Chase account that required you to get a text message to move forward, it's going to bring up that screen. You're going to get that login information, submit it, and then you have that, all those transactions coming in from there. So once those transactions come in, they get brought in as uncategorized. So in this case, I only have a single transaction that's uncategorized. But when it gets brought in, what you then want to do is click on that transaction and kind of take this as an example, because I don't have a ton of transactions here that are relevant. But what's going to happen is if you have some sort of expense, so in this case it's a withdrawal, some sort of expense or bill that associates with this, typically it's going to be the same amount, I'll then be able to simply select that. It's going to bring that up as my best possible match. In this case, I don't have that, so it's looking for transactions around that date for similar amounts. So for example, this might be a check that we wrote for a couple of different invoices, or excuse me, a couple of different bills that we had to pay. And if I need to select multiple bills, I can actually do that to match that up. Now, in this case, if I go over, I only have 33 pending, it's not gonna let me do that because I'm in a negative balance. But this is the way that you would actually match transactions. Now, if those transactions didn't exist, let's say I never entered an expense for this and I used my credit card to purchase this for my business, I can simply go to categorize manually, select expense, select the expense account that this is associated to. So let's say this was some sort of office supplies that we had to purchase, who that vendor is, if I have that information, attach a receipt. I can even attach it from different cloud storage options that I have, and then simply hit save. So then the expense gets created and matched to the bank transaction all in one step. So this is really important. Obviously, don't do this, willy-nilly if you don't have some information on how this is done, because if you have an accountant or you find an accountant later and everything is messed up, they're not going to be too happy about that. But this is, of course, really important in making sure that you are rectifying all the transactions you have against, or reconciling them against your bank account. And to actually reconcile, at the top right here, you'll see that there's a gear icon. Clicking down on that takes us to an option to actually reconcile this account, go through all the transactions for a period, and then close that account once we have reconciled it. So those are really important options to focus on. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on every single sales and purchase module. I'm going to kind of show you the basic layout for one of them, and it applies basically to all of them. So I'm going to go to the most important one for me, which is invoices. You'll notice that there's a bunch of other modules here. Now, if these modules don't apply to you, or let's say you don't see some of these modules and you want them, you're going to need to enable them inside of settings and preferences. And we'll take a quick look at that in just a moment. There's simply a checkbox there. You can enable or disable them. Now, some of them you can't do that to. So for example, invoices are the base requirement inside of Zoho Books for all transactions. So you have to have invoices. But let's say sales orders, you don't need them. Maybe your business doesn't rely on them. You don't have to have them. So let's take a quick look at invoices and what it looks like here. So the first thing you'll notice is I basically have a list of all my invoices. Now I can filter this in a couple of different ways. So if I click on all invoices here at the top left, it's going to give me some default filters that I can look through. And then you'll notice that you actually can scroll down and you can create a custom view. So a custom view allows you to basically have only the options that you want to see. So let's say there's certain columns that you want to see, and maybe there's certain criteria that you want to filter for. So for example, I could create a custom view for only the invoices that have a, let's see here, invoice balance that is greater than, let's say, $1,000. So I only want to see those invoices in a custom view. I can call this my big balance view. And then I can choose what columns I want to have here. Do I want to share this with other users? I'll say, yes, go ahead. I'll hit save. And then now I can choose big balance, and it's only going to bring invoices that have a balance over $1,000. And you'll see that's an option there. So here inside of the invoice module, and like all the other modules, there's a really important icon here, and Josh is going to reference this later, and that's this 3 horizontal lines, or the hamburger icon. So if I go ahead and click on the hamburger icon, you'll see that there's a bunch of different options here, but the one that Josh is going to focus on, and the one that's really important for the rest of this webinar, is the import functionality. Now, there's also an export functionality, which puts everything in a CSV. So if you ever need that, you can definitely do so, or you can just export the current view. But if we go ahead and click on import, and you'll notice that this is an option that's available inside of all of the different modules in Zoho Books. So I didn't point it out, but it's in items, it's in banking for bringing in bank statements, and it's in all of these options here for the different sales records and purchase records. So here inside import, you'll see that there's a sample CSV file or a Excel file. I can go ahead and click on this, and it basically will show me a sample of what a import file should look like. And I can go ahead and open this just to kind of give you an idea. And you may not actually see this because I have only just my browser selected. But essentially, it's going to show me just an example of the different column headers I have. Now, you don't need to have specific titles or names in the column headers. You can have different ones that are a little bit different than the one in our file. Because what happens is when you select a Excel file here inside of Zoho Books for the imports, I'm just going to go ahead and select that sample invoices one to show you what it looks like. And there's a few other options here. Do I want to auto-generate invoice numbers, or do I want to use the ones that are in the import file? Do I want to link them to sales orders? Do I want to map customer addresses? I'm going to leave those blank for now. So here on the next page, you'll see that these are the file headers from my file. These are the ones from Zoho Books. Obviously, I used the example file, so all of them are exactly the same. And Zoho Books decided that, hey, it recognized almost all of them. It's going to go ahead and put those in. For the ones that it doesn't recognize, let's say you don't have that, you can actually go ahead and just simply click on the dropdown, select the one that you know corresponds to the Zoho Books field, and then it'll import everything in that column. So this is a really important part of the import functionality that Josh is going to go over. So just wanted to point that out to you. And then obviously the next stage of this, there's a lot more mapping options. But the next stage of this basically will give you an error report before you import anything, lets you know if it can't import any records. And then finally, it'll let you import those transactions. So that's something that's important for every single module in Zoho Books when you are doing a migration. So whether you're bringing in expense data, that's going to be the same exact process. Whether you're bringing in lists of inventory items or services, that's going to be the same process there too. And I think Josh calls this, he just calls it list data, I believe, in his presentation. So when he mentions that, you'll know what he's talking about here. Now, the other options inside both sales and purchases are pretty self-explanatory. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into all of them in super detail because I do want to show you some other things. If you have any specific questions, go ahead and put them in the questions panel. But for the most part, there is a workflow here in Zoho Books that is already established. You can choose to use it if you'd like. What I mean by that is, invoices are the base requirement for transactions to collect funds on, right? So if you create an invoice, you'll notice that there are different payment options that you can integrate with here inside Zoho Books. And so you'd need an invoice to get paid. Whether you use these payment options or a customer pays you by check or some other way, you have to have an invoice. But maybe you want to send out estimates beforehand. So Zoho Books gives you an option to actually convert estimates into invoices, and a customer can accept them directly inside the portal. Or you can have multiple items that are purchased under one order, and you can create a sales order, but maybe they're delivered in different batches based on what's available. So you'd actually have multiple invoices associated to one sales order. That's kind of the basic workflow that's already available there. Retainer invoices are basically prepayments of services. So think of a retainer like the way a lawyer would have a retainer, kind of similar concept. And then recurring invoices, as I mentioned earlier, is basically a really simple subscription. But anything more complex, you can then jump into the subscriptions product.
Hey,
so
Tyler,
that is
before you continue, I'm going to launch this second poll question.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to ask you that.
No worries, you're doing great. Obviously, there's so much to cover with Zoho Books, but I think Tyler does the best overview of Zoho Books and anybody in Zoho.
No pressure. And I'll take a quick peek at the questions panel and see what's going on here.
D-Raj is doing a great job answering those questions as well.
Awesome. D-Raj is a wealth of knowledge, so I'm glad he is able to share some of that.
There was one in chat talking about customizing invoice template. I'm not sure if you did that. I was just stepped out for a second. Okay,
I
good.
just saw that, and I'm just looking through some of the other questions that you guys have been answering, just to see if there's anything that's worth kind of showing on the screen. And obviously, I mean, there's lots of great questions. If only we could share all of them.
Right. And, you know, there's a lot to show, even in just Zoho Books. So we're going to have to kind of keep this limited to an extent here.
And if you could, folks, just try to keep your questions in the questions
questions area, right?
Just so it's a little easier, because what ends up happening is that, you know, even if you're not asking a question, somebody else may want to see what others have asked, and it's easy to track that.
Yep. So I'll give this about, I think we're good to go. And basically I just asked, have you ever used Zoho Books? And it looks like about 49% of our viewers have, and then the remainder, they have not, or they've used other Zoho applications. So I'll go ahead and show those results. And Holly, you can continue.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to show you kind of in detail the invoice part of this. As I mentioned, it's very similar for the other modules, and so I think that'll give you a good idea. When I first click on Invoice to create a new one, you know, of course, I clicked on the plus icon here. There's also this option to create a new invoice that's at the top right. There we go. You see new. So we're creating a new invoice. And so here inside, here inside my invoice screen, there are some required fields that are labeled in red. You'll notice that one of these says warehouse name. This is specific to my organization because I have Zoho Inventory integrated and I have multiple warehouses in inventory. So if you don't have that on yours, don't worry about it. But a few different options you'll see here are, of course, the requirements of like selecting the customer. So their information comes through here. This customer happened to have a sales tax associated with them when they were created. So that's why that's being populated here. There is a really important option that if I don't mention, Val will definitely mention it, which is the integration with Avalara. So if you need to calculate sales tax, you can, of course, do so manually. That can, of course, be very complicated, especially if you have Nexus in multiple states, which the threshold is very low these days for getting Nexus.
Let me just toss in one quick comment here,
Yes,
Tal.
go
Seriously,
ahead.
Folks, if you deal with sales tax in any way, shape, or form, you're really doing a home lobotomy kit if you don't use a solution like Avalara. And I'm not just trying to sell their stuff. I'm telling you, these states are on a rampage tear on sales tax. And you absolutely want to be compliant across the board. And the easy way, it's going to cost you some money, but pay it and sleep at night versus dealing with these guys. It's not cool what's going on. So if you got any kind of sales tax, listen to my advice here and do that, and you're going to be very happy you did.
And so I'll show you what that looks like. If somebody could put in the help document link for Zoho Books Avalara into the chat, that would be really great.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So essentially what that integration does that Val is talking about is it takes the billing address here for the customer, and it takes the items that you are selling to this customer. So you have this kind of whole list of inventory that you might have already set up, and it is a requirement in that Avalara integration. And they basically will determine, based on their jurisdiction where they live, is that a taxable item or not? And then they will calculate the exact taxes and put it onto the invoice here in Zoho Books for you. And then they also remit those taxes to the different jurisdictions. So you don't have to worry about, like, you know, let's say you have a whole bunch of customers in New York and you're working out of Oklahoma. You don't have to worry about creating or go ahead and paying those sales taxes regularly. Avalara kind of handles that for you. So that's all I want to mention there. So let's say I have this invoice that I'm creating. If I need any custom fields, I can actually do that. And I saw there was a question on setting up the template, so I'm going to tell you how to do that in just a second. So this layout can actually be customized as well. So these columns, you know, what the labels here are, and that's all done from the preferences item for invoices. But once you have these created, you'll notice that I can actually include some additional items for this customer. So when we selected the customer, there might be some unbilled expenses that we can add onto this invoice. There's some other sales orders that can be associated to this customer as well. We're going to ignore that for now. I already have some integrations here with a couple of different payment gateways. I can choose which payment gateway I want to make available to this customer. So if I want to simply uncheck one of these and they can only see the one that's, if they use the portal, that's the one that it's going to be presented to them. And then I have this information here at the bottom that this customer has retainer payments. I can apply these. I'm not going to do that, so I'll just go ahead and ignore that. So now at the very, very bottom, you'll see there's a couple of options here. One is to basically make this a recurring invoice. So that means it'll repeat on some frequency. That's not the case for me, so I won't do that. And then the other option is this template. So there is a standard template in Zoho Books. And basically what this lets you do is choose the invoice template directly from here. But before you choose any of these invoice templates right off the bat, what you want to do is you're going to want to customize them inside of settings. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to go ahead and save and send this. And it brings up the kind of email template that can also be customized. You'll see there's a link here for this invoice in the portal. I'll go ahead and hit send. And so that has made its way to the customer. So now how to actually customize that invoice template, you'll go into settings. You'll see templates are listed here. And then here inside of templates, I can hover above the templates. In this case, I'm doing invoices, hit edit. And then it gives me a bunch of different options as far as, let's say, the actual item table. So this is what I was mentioning, where you can actually change, instead of it saying rate, maybe you want it to say amount. For example, amount's already there. That might be a little confusing. Maybe you can change that to total. So there's some options here, and it's it's kind of focused in. You can't do everything in this invoice template here, but you can do kind of most changes. If you want to do a completely custom template, what you'll do is, and I'm not sure if we are enabling this for everyone or you still have to ask support, but they will do it if you don't see this option, is customize layout. So if you have a completely custom template that you want to build, you can hit customize layout, and it basically just gives you essentially what looks like kind of a Word doc here. And it has all these different placeholders. That's what these percent signs and the variable in between are. And so these are variables that bring in different data. So if I want to insert something that I know is going to come from the items category. So for example, here in the line items, let's say I want to have a picture of this item in my line item. I'll go to item. I'll go to item image, I think. There we go, item image. And I can hit insert placeholder if my cursor is already there, or I can copy and paste it. And so now when I use this template, it's going to populate a picture of that item if I uploaded one in the actual invoice itself. And there's lots of different options here you'll see that let you do that. Maybe there's a specific field or custom field for the contact info that I want to pull. You can do that here as well. So this is basically what a custom template would look like. You could save that. And then you can choose your default template. So in this case, this is my default template, the standard one. And then if I wanted to choose a different one, I could do so. And if I need to change them, you can do so the way we did that from inside of the invoice module. So I'm going to go over for a couple minutes before I pass it back to Josh, because I want to show you a couple other things. So the purchases side is kind of the mirror image of what we saw in sales. So this shouldn't be anything too confusing, but basically this is where you're going to log expenses. We do have, and I'll actually put I think I have a link to our full-fledged demo of Zoho Books, so we'll put that in the chat option in just a moment. But you'll see here that expenses are very simple inside Zoho Books. If you need to do kind of more complex expense tracking, meaning primarily if you need to do reimbursements with your employees, then Zoho Expense, which is another application, can tie in to this specific function here inside of Zoho Books. And then the rest of these kind of are self-explanatory, like setting up recurring expenses. And then purchase orders and bills, I'll focus on this for just a second, because if you have inventory This is really important. So when you send out a purchase order and the vendor receives that, you'll then have an option to mark those items as received. And then, of course, typically you have some sort of payment terms like net 30. When you do so, the actual inventory, when it's marked as received, is when your inventory levels go up. And then the costs are attributed once the bill is then paid out. So that's a really important part of purchase orders, is that there's actually a receives step for receiving those items before you actually pay them. So those are the sales and purchase modules there. I mentioned time tracking earlier and project management. So as I said earlier, these are really, really simple projects. And you'll actually see there's only 4 different billing methods here. So one is it's a fixed cost project. We just want to track hours. The other is that we are charging based on the overall project hours. So let's say we are charging $45 an hour for this project overall, or I'm charging based on task hours. So I have multiple tasks and they can have their own hourly rates. And so depending on what task we choose, the customers charge that. And then lastly, we have staff hours. So depending on what staff member is working, we might have different hourly rates that are applied here. So there's a very simple budget here inside of this project here. There's a custom field that you'll see that was, it's just a checkbox that we had here for some reporting purposes if need be. And so once these projects are created, you can then record time against them. You have a timesheet. We also have client approvals enabled. So that means that, let's say we actually need to get the customer's approval before we bill them for that time. You might have a specific use case where that's necessary. You can actually send those out and they can do that too. So that's under client approvals. And then finally, there's some options here that are specific to accountants. So like making journal entries, or if you're a pro user, you kind of know what you're doing, managing and setting up your chart of accounts. Josh is going to talk about doing this. So this is something that, feel free to reserve your questions for Josh on. And then you have reports. So inside of Zoho Books, you have something like 5 dozen reports. That's probably a higher number now that are built in. These reports can be exported, as we talked about. They can be saved, customized, lots of different options. I highly, highly recommend just spending some time exploring the different reports here if you're new to Zoho Books. It's going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to make your business most likely a lot more successful if you know actually what's going on inside of it. So spend some time here. Kind of learn, what each ones do. The main ones, obviously, you want to start out with are the business overview reports, which are so important, like your P&L. There are some custom reports that you can save based on the filters. So you'll see those options like here inside profit and loss. If I customize this report, I can save it as a custom report. You'll see that button at the very bottom there, and then that'll show up under custom reports. And then advanced analytics. So advanced analytics is an integration with another Zoho application called Zoho Analytics. Zoho Analytics is a BI tool, so business intelligence tool. So if you've ever used a product like Power BI or Tableau, you'll know that these are really, really sophisticated reporting tools. Basically, they're bringing in raw data from any which place. It could be finance data, it could be sales data, it could be third-party data. And then it brings it here inside of Zoho Books and lets you configure it. So this finance dashboard, I think my integration is not popping up here, but it can actually load your Zoho Analytics dashboards here inside Zoho Books. Of course, you can go directly into Zoho Analytics to actually create these and configure them. But it's a really unique option. There's a lot of different use cases for this. Basically, if these reports just aren't cutting it for you, you want to create your own report, you can do that inside Advanced Analytics, and then you can actually see them here inside Zoho Books. So those are the main kind of options inside Zoho Books I wanted to point out. The only other thing I want to tell you is that when you go into settings, you want to spend some time here and really focus, especially on preferences. There's a lot of questions here that you want to answer as far as, do we want to use these modules? Do we give discounts to customers at the item level, at the entire invoice level? So you really want to go through these, make sure that this is set up to how your business actually operates, right? Really important, even basic stuff, putting in your logo. The portal is something that's built into Zoho Books, and you definitely want to take advantage of this. The portal basically lets customers log into their own account inside of Zoho Books and view and pay for their invoices, accept estimates. So if you have any ongoing relationships with customers, especially ones that go for a long period of time, you definitely want to create a dummy customer and see what the portal looks like, how this actually operates, and go ahead and look through the help documentation on the portal just to see all the different features of it. Highly, highly recommend it. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time today to go through it. So I just want to let Josh know that I'm going to switch over to him in just a couple of minutes so he can get ready. And I'll point out a few other things. The other thing I wanted to point out is if we scroll down here to our integrations, you'll see that we have both online payments and integrations here. So online payments are all the different payment gateways that tie into Zoho Books. So there are, I believe, 12 different payment gateways as of right now. Some of these support ACH. So for example, authorize.net is over here. So it says e-check available. You can actually do that. So let's say your customers have to pay extremely large invoices. Maybe you sell machinery and they're paying, $50,000, $100,000 in invoices. You're obviously not going to take credit cards for those. So you can set up e-checks to actually accept those payments. If you do accept credit cards, many of these different payment gateways will be excellent. Stripe is our preferred gateway. That's what Zoho, I believe, uses across all of our businesses for collecting our own credit card payments. So these will tie in directly, and customers can enter in their credit card information inside Zoho's PCI compliant forms that's on the portal, and then customers can basically pay directly online. You can also enter the information from the Zoho Books screen. If you need to type in their credit card or swipe that in, you can do that too. And then lastly, we have integrations. So you've probably noticed by now that there are lots of different Zoho apps that Zoho Books ties into. This is definitely something that you want to focus on after you've kind of established a basic workflow. So if you're using Zoho CRM, for example, we've done entire webinars on that. If you're interested, let us know in the chat, and we'll link you to one of those presentations. So take a look at these, see which ones are most relevant to you. Maybe project management inside Zoho Books just isn't cutting it, and you need a more sophisticated system. Zoho Projects is there for you. And then you'll notice that there's lots of third-party apps that we tie into as well. And then Val's absolute favorite is Avalara for that sales tax calculation. So sorry I went a little over, Josh. Hope that's okay. We'll pass it back over to you. And if there's any questions, please feel free to put them in the questions panel, and I'll keep an eye on those.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tal. I'll go ahead and launch the third poll question while Josh is getting ready.
Sounds good.
And we appreciate you going through that, Tal. It really helps out. I know a lot of individuals, and definitely D-Raj in the background answering a lot of those tough-hitting questions. We appreciate that as well.
Yeah, D-Raj, our man that never sleeps.
Yeah. Hey, I will say, because Tala was talking about analytics and how powerful of a tool it is, we do have an analytics webinar October 20th, and that will be with another one of our Zoho partners, and they're experts in the matter. So be on the lookout for that. Actually, I'll put the link in the chat for if you wanted to register for that. And I'll give this about 10 more seconds, and then we'll continue on.
Sounds good.
Cool. So Josh, let me pass control over to you, and then you will be in control, sir. Awesome.
Okay, awesome. So thanks, Tala, for the great opening act with the introduction to Zoho Books. So migrating accounting systems. So today we're going to take a look at the migration path, what it entails to actually migrate your data from one system to another, as well as making sure that your old system is clean, reconciled, the steps to make sure that you're ready to migrate, the list data, open balances, the data migration check, and go live. So here, actually, let's go back for 1 second. So within the migration path, there's definitely different ways of doing this, making sure that you have a clean migration and your data is able to be migrated appropriately. We'll definitely walk through the steps in terms of importing and how we should import and what that looks like. Another thing just to note is there are definitely different ways to migrate your data from one system to another. And by doing that, you really need to understand what you actually need to migrate and what the data is. So typically when I do migrations and have conversations with my clients, everybody says, I want all the data migrated. And typically you don't need the entire data migration, the complete data set. So we're going to use a migration from QuickBooks Online to Zoho Books as an example. So my business is a wine company. We've been in business since 2000. So we've been around for 21 years. And from time to time, I go back 5-6 years of data in terms of customer orders, but I really only need 2 or 3 years. So within that conversation, the one major part of the migration is we could bring in all your transactions from beginning of time, starting in 2000, going forward. The second option is to bring in 2 or 3 years of data that you actually look back to. And if you look at a balance sheet and P&L, financials going back further than that, we could journalize in the differences into Zoho Books as a journal entry so you can run year over year financials within Zoho Books. And then the third option, which most people take depending on the business type and what you need, is an open balance migration, which would include open accounts receivable, open accounts payable, as well as any other transactions that are open at the time of migrating. So now we understand the types of the migrations. Let's discuss some of the integrations. So typically within an accounting system, most people integrate into a different system. The greatest part about being within Zoho and the Zoho suite is, just like Tala mentioned earlier, they have an application for almost anything and have as well different integrations that they offer for different applications that you might currently have. So one of them is payroll, inventory management, which Zoho Inventory is great. CRM, that's Zoho's wheelhouse. Online payment solutions that Tala went over before switching. Accounts payable, accounts receivable solutions, 1099 software, Office 365, and any other applications that you have. So once we understand the integrations aspect and we know what tools are connected to our software, the first place that we start within the migration is the chart of accounts. And the reason is that this gives us the ability to revamp any accounting issues that we were experiencing previously and make sure that everything is completely clean and ready to go in the new system. So as an example, I'm working with a client now who their chart of accounts account types are completely incorrect. They have cost of goods sold, which are asset accounts. They have income accounts that are showing up on the P&L, which is really a balance sheet account. So we're working together to make sure the chart of accounts are going in correctly and that they don't have to do any custom reporting outside the system, but all the reporting that they're using within Zoho Books will actually work. The second aspect is having a clean legacy system. And that is to make sure that the previous system, in this example, QuickBooks, all the accounts are reconciled and that we have a clean cutoff date from the time that we want to move from one system to another, and to make sure that no data entry will be put in past that date. So using the example that we were saying before, I'm a wine company. I'm using QuickBooks Online. I've been in business since 2000, and we're going to do a 2 to 3 year data migration. And my cutoff date is going to be 9/30/2021. So typically within the migration, if you hire a partner to do it, I can bring in all the data as of 8/31 at the end of August. I hope that there's 31 days in August. Let's see. Yep, there is. And then once September is closed and reconciled, today's the 30th of September, this weekend we'll bring in September's activity to make sure that there's no downtime and that we have everything reconciled and matches. So the first part of the migration, and I'm obviously going to demo this and show you what we're discussing, but the first part is the list data. And the list data includes customers, vendors, items, as well as the chart of accounts. And that's the first step. The first step is to get the chart of accounts in, revamp, change any accounting issues or anything that we had previously. And then we start bringing in the customers and then the vendors. And then after we have the customers and vendor list data in, we can look at the items as well as terms for customers and vendors. And then the list data is approved. And then we could start looking at either open transactions as well as regular transactions, invoices, bills, bill payments, expenses, etc., and start importing them into Zoho Books. After everything is imported, we then have to make sure all our imports are correct and we are ready to go live. And the main thing is to review, if we're doing 3 years, to review a trial balance year after year, make sure everything matches. Also to review transaction history, customer and vendor balances, and do a full reconciliation of the system to make sure that there's no inconsistencies and that they're fixed before go live and the data matches from both systems. So typically there are many companies that like to run parallel, and running parallel means that you would be using Zoho Books at the same time as QuickBooks Online to be able to make sure that everything was converted properly and looks good, as well as you feel comfortable with the migration and your data being moved. We personally try not to allow customers not to encourage running parallel because it's double entry and it also creates more work. So we try to do the training as well as user acceptance during the process of the migration. So then once we get to the go live date, you feel comfortable, we push the button already, and you're able to move on. There are many companies that I've worked with who want to run parallel and wants to make sure that they feel comfortable with the system. That definitely is up to you. But typically there are ways within the project plan to make sure duplicate entry and parallel doesn't have to be done. So now we have the foundation and understanding of the migration and what it takes to do that. So we are going to go into Zoho Books. Just give me a second to share my screen.
Yeah, while Josh is doing that, I'll launch the fourth polling question. This will kind of give us a better gauge on who's done migrating to different other accounting systems. And obviously this question, if you're an accountant, I would imagine you migrate all the time. Well, definitely like a public accountant. Awesome. We'll give that about 10 more seconds and then you can go carry on, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Can everybody see my screen okay, Nathan?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you for the validation. All right. So now that we're here within Zoho Books, the first step is to look at the chart of accounts. So typically, when we migrate, data from one system to another. If you're going to do this yourself, which I personally highly recommend asking somebody for help or somebody who has done this before. Unfortunately, it's not a straightforward process in the sense of putting your historic data into a system and then it automatically brings it to Zoho Books. It happens to be a little bit of a manual process and a lot of combing through data and understanding the import functionality and being able to look at the data to make sure it's correct before putting it in the system. So right here is my QuickBooks online company where I have my chart of accounts and I want to take this chart of accounts and put it into my Zoho Books. So when we go into Zoho Books and go into accountant chart of accounts, under the gear icon, we have import chart of accounts, export chart of accounts, etc. And when we go into import chart of accounts, there is a sample file that Zoho provides with exactly what the formatting needs to look like and what we need to do to get the chart of accounts in here. So if we look on our Excel sheet, we have our account name, our account code, description, account type, the parent, the parent account, account number, currency, opening balance, as well as if it's debit or credit. So if we take our sheet and look at the raw data of our chart of accounts, this is a QuickBooks export that we're using as an example. We'll see that we need to first customize this and bring this into a format that Zoho can actually use to import. So if we go in, what I like to do, and this is a trick that was taught to me by other colleagues of mine through Presti and Nagley, is to keep a record and a track record of everything that has changed through Excel. So here's the original sheet, and we're just going to call this original. Then we're going to go in here, call this modified, and then we're going to have an import tab. Now, Zoho only uses CSV files, so to be able to import with CSV, we're going to then take our import tab, put it into a CSV format, and then save that somewhere so we can use that for import. So if we look here, we have the account, the type, the detail type, description, and balance. If we look at our headers from Zoho, I am going to throw them on the top here. We'll see that we need account name, account code, description of the account type, as well as the parent account, account number, etc. So the major fields that you will need to complete the import are asterisked in the next screen. So if you go into here, I'm just going to select a sample. And here you'll see the account name is obviously a mandatory field and the account type, and everything else doesn't need to be entered if you don't have that information or don't need that information. Another thing that I would personally suggest is that's very important within Zoho Books and makes it a lot easier to view your chart of accounts and to look through reporting is having an account code. An account code is an account number that gives you the ability to number your chart of accounts based on an accounting numbering system, and gives you the ability for accountants and other people to refer to the specific account by the number. So as an example, bank accounts are usually either 100 or 10,000, depending on if you use a 3-digit number or a 4-digit number. So if John called me and said, Josh, I'm having so much trouble with account 1050, it's not reconciling properly, I'm not sure what to do, I can then look up look at account 1050 and know exactly what he's talking about. So typically, just quickly, the account numbering typically starts with 10,000s to 11,000s are bank account numbers. Accounts receivable is usually 12,000. Then you have assets, which are 13,000s. Liabilities, which are 14 to 16,000s. And then your income, just to jump a little bit, your income accounts usually start at 4,000s, and your expense accounts are between 5,000 and 8,000. So if you called me as an example, John calls me again, says I'm having trouble with account 5045, I know that that should be an expense account. So that's a very good thing to keep in mind. A lot of people, depending on who set up your books, don't use the account codes, but within Zoho, it's very helpful. And I strongly suggest that. So after we have the chart of accounts ready, and we go to import, we can press import here next, which will bring us to an importing place. This gives us the ability to map our fields. Once we go here and press next, it's going to say if there's any error messages, anything like that. It says none of the rows can be imported. And once you look here, these accounts already exist. So we can't duplicate it. So we would have to go back into our import sheet and change the map. The other thing is just to note, and this is from all different transactions, is knowing how Zoho needs the data to be formatted to be able to import. So as an example, this is our chart of accounts. QuickBooks separates a parent-child relationship with a colon. So if you notice here, landscaping services, job materials, the landscaping services is the parent account, and job materials is a sub-account of landscaping services. So within our Zoho template, if you notice, parent account should be in a different column to be able to show the parent-child relationship. So that happens in different transaction types, but just know that just in case. Okay. So now,
Hey, Josh, I'll go and launch the fifth polling question real quick. And
Nathan, while you're doing that, I kind of want to reiterate something for folks too that Josh mentioned. Folks, when you're going through this migration process, you must keep data in different phases. Life goes wrong when you do these migrations and you've got to rebuild the world. If you don't, you're starting all over again from scratch, or you're cleaning up a giant mess. So you've got, as Josh was talking about, he was using different sheets in the workbook to do that. Absolutely. Do it any which way you can, but you've got to have ways to go back to data in different steps when stuff goes wrong.
yeah, and my poll question right now is, what about migrating worries you? And actually, 57% of the audience is saying importing accurate information. So that kind of is a way to reduce the risk of, like Val was mentioning, losing the data. And you can also keep track to see if your data in your new system is accurate or not. Definitely. So I'll give that about 5 more seconds, and Josh, you can continue on and take us home.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, Val, for reiterating that point. So now that we imported our chart of accounts, we can start importing the rest of our list data. So the first thing is the customers, and then vendors as well as items. So if you go into the customers, obviously under the gear icon in import customers, there is a sample sheet for every single type of import that you need to do. So here in my folder, I have all the sample sheets. And if we look at the customer template, we'll notice that it gives us the breakdown between customer name, display name, company name, first name, last name, phone number, mobile, the billing addresses, ship to addresses, as well as any custom fields or anything like that, and tax name, tax authority, tax percentage, etc. So once we have our data formatted and corrected, we can look at, here's our customer list from Greg's Design. This is a QuickBooks Online sample company. And we can then put this into the import and import this in. And this would work the same way with customers and vendors. And then once we have the customers and vendors in here, we can then go look at our item list and import our items and make sure that they're mapped properly. So the main thing with items is that items need to be associated to a sales account as well as a purchase account, depending on if you use inventory or not. So if we look at this item 103 yellow and we go into the edit field, if we scroll down here, we notice that we have a selling price and a cost price. So this is crucial on the item aspect, because when you are importing invoices, your invoices actually use the items, and the invoices will be posting to the correct account based off of the item mapping that was done when the items were in there. This is also very crucial for somebody who's doing a migration with Zoho inventory as well, because you want to make sure your items were purchased and the purchase orders are put in correctly and mapped to the correct account as well. Typically, if you notice that a item mapping was wrong and you correct the mapping after the invoices were already put in, unfortunately, the mapping doesn't go back to historic. It has to be right in the get-go. So the main thing with list data, and the reason why I'm focusing on list data this much, is that we can edit list data from a mass import. Transactions cannot be edited. So if you put in invoices or bills, bill payments, once they're in the system and imported correctly, if there's a mistake, they need to be deleted and re-imported. But within list data, we can make any corrections that we want. So as an example, if I go into our items and I notice that I'm now starting a new mapping starting September 30th, and I want my mapping to be different, we can then do that.
Stand by, folks. You haven't lost sound.
Yeah, sorry about that. We can then take an export of our item list. And once we have the export of the item list, we can make any of the changes that we want here. So if we have a new sales account as an example, we can add, let's say we have sales and sales trade. We can change the items that we want on this export sheet and be able to import it back into the system, and it will automatically change the account, as well as any other additional information that needs to be changed within list data. The only thing that you can't change is the name, the customer name, vendor name, as well as the item name within a mass import. Okay, so now we went through that. Now we can discuss the transactions. Now that we have our chart of accounts imported and we revamped everything to the way that we want it to look like, we imported our customer list, our vendor list, our items, we put in terms, associated them to the correct customer and vendors. We are good to go to start entering in transactions. Now, the one thing that I want to mention is, just like Val even reiterated in terms of keeping different sheets and having a methodology of keeping track of what changes you're doing in Excel before importing. The main thing is it's always good to run a test import because data flows differently when you import. And if you're going to import 5,000 lines of data, it might make sense to import, let's say, 10 or 15, see what it looks like first, and then import the rest after you've tested your anomalies and get an idea of how it's going to look. So within the importing functionality, there definitely is a plan or a pattern that needs to be followed, such as you can't import invoices without customers in the system. You can't import invoices without your items being there. You can't import bills, bill payments without the bills in there first, and so on. So it definitely has to follow a chronological order of understanding the transactions to make sure that if the transaction is dependent on a different type of transaction, that is put in first, such as a invoice and an invoice payment. You wouldn't be able to import invoice payments if the invoice wasn't there. I know that sounds very obvious, but I've definitely heard of people making those mistakes before. So once we start entering in the transactions, we need to start making sure that we have all the data pulled from the system that we're migrating to. So if we are migrating from QuickBooks Online, we need to pull invoice reports with invoice detail, invoice payment detail, customer bills, bill payments, expenses, and so on, and make sure that we have all the data that we need so we can format all the sheets to match the templates with the correct formatting so we could start importing. The other thing is that I just wanted to mention, when we were talking about the chart of accounts import or even a customer import, if we use the same type of account header or a header within our import, when we go into the import screen, I'm just going to jump back to the chart of accounts for a second and go into our chart of accounts and go to the gear icon on the right and go into import, and we choose our file. If the headers match with these names that are here, all of the imported file headers will automatically pop up and match appropriately because it recognizes the header name. Now, it sometimes is time consuming to do that, but it definitely is helpful so you don't have to spend hours of time making sure your mapping is correct and looking back to the original sheets during this process. The other thing is if you do get an error message, if you save these selections for using during future imports, as long as this doesn't change and there's an error within the data, you press next, it shows you an error message. When you go back into the same module to try to re-import, it will automatically register the headers here. So I know we're running out of time shortly, so just in short, now that the list data is done, the list data really is the driving force of the accounting system. And that's why I spent so much time making sure everybody understands how that goes in, because now the transactions become a little easier because we have Zoho Books configured the way that we want it to be configured. So I'm just going to view this invoice as an example. And here we have an item description. This is the item that was purchased, CPA Academy Service, the rate, the amount, and the quantity, as well as any additional information for the customer that's up here. So when we pull our invoice data, we have to know for any transaction what is actually meaningful to us that we need in here. The quantity, as well as the rate, the amount, and make sure that we have all that information on our import sheets. And the importing functionality is the same for all transactions, where we would go to the hamburger icon, go into import invoices, be able to choose our sheet. I'm just going to use a random sheet, and then take us to this where we can map everything that we need to map to show all the information within those transactions. After we finish all the importing, then we go into our reports tab on the left. And personally, I like to do this from a trial balance standpoint. There definitely is different ways to be able to reconcile the imports, but I personally like to do it from a trial balance to start. And how I would do this is to line up a trial balance from QuickBooks and take the trial balance from Zoho Books and look at all my debits and credits, make sure all the numbers are accurate, match exactly from one system to the other. If they're not matching, there might be some anomalies within the import data that are patterns. And once the pattern is found, you'll know exactly what needs to be fixed and how to fix it after you fix a few. Typically, if the P&L, the profit and loss statement, is off, that is due to cash. The bank account will be off as well because expenses come out of the bank account. So if you clean up the expense accounts first, you will then, cash should fall in line. And the same thing with the balance sheet with assets and liabilities. So after we have a clean, clear set of books and everything matches properly and we feel comfortable with the numbers, then we're able to go live, push the button, and say we're done with the migration. But before then, during the needs analysis and the process, we need to understand what reports are we looking for, and what are some new features that we want to accomplish within a system, besides moving to Zoho Books for greater functionality and having the ecosystem behind you within Zoho. It also gives you the ability to really feel comfortable within the system and get better reporting. And that typically, in terms of what your needs are, of what you don't have, should be discussed throughout the process to understand what you need and what you want to accomplish within the new system. So that is the overall quick demo of migration, what the migration entails, what we need to do for the migration, and as well as what your involvement would be to make sure it's a smooth process and everything is transferred into Zoho Books correctly, accurately, and comfortably.
There was a little bit of discussion in the questions area, Josh, about how long does it take to typically migrate? And the answer I put back there was, really, it depends on the complexity of the data coming across. But a simple QBO, very simple little QBO thing, I think you could bring it across fairly quickly, right? What's your opinion there? Let's hear what you have to say.
So I'll tell you what my typical thing is that I say is, at least for me to do a migration, I would say it's 4 to 6 weeks, because there's a lot of interaction with the client of understanding the data and making sure everything is integrated properly and appropriately. And it's typically could be, start from 30 hours of work till, 100 hours of work, depending on the complexity of the data. But if you're doing it yourself, depending on how much time you want to put into it and the complexity, if it's a basic QBO migration, it could be done in let's say 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And I've done some in the past where it's been quick, or kind of like what you're saying. It just depends. on the complexity of the data. And we are at nearing the end of the session. So I do want to say, Josh, thank you for going through migrations. Obviously, Tala, you did a wonderful job for us as well. But if y'all want to contact Josh, here's his email and his firm's website as well. And if you'll check out the handouts tab, there's a link for the CPA site that we mentioned earlier, and also Preston and Nagley's website. And I will launch the 4th polling question. Really, we're asking if you'd like to be contacted by Josh and his experts over at Preston and Nagley. They do a wonderful job, and they've been a big part of the Zoho Partner Program, and they've been able to help out a lot of individuals with Zoho Books. So I'll let that go for a little bit. And Josh, like always, we appreciate your time and you helping us with this session. And if y'all have any questions, you have his contact information as well. And if you would like him to reach out to you, he can do that as well through that polling question.
Good questions, everyone. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.
Yeah, and just a reminder, if you would like to receive that CPE credit, I'm going to end the session shortly. And please fill out the evaluation. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Bye.